Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. Today we are going to talk about two new horror films that are worth discussing, as well as play another round of Horror Tubi Roulette, and we'll explain more of the rules once we get to that point. I'm particularly excited to talk about one of these films today.
Yes, I'm actually really excited to talk about both because I'm going to say right up front, I absolutely love both of these films, and I can't figure out which one I like more than the other. I want more stuff like this in horror. I was completely blown away. They're both pretty long films. They both clock in at over 2 hours, and not a wasted second for either one of them as far as I'm concerned. But we're going to start out with The Empty Man from 2020. I really want to talk this one up because this one got a bum rap. It feels, just by the marketing and just by looking at the name and everything, it feels like a typical teen Scream. And everybody thought it was going to be another Slender Man, but it couldn't be more opposite. This one's written, directed by David Pryor. And this is a behind-the-scenes filmmaker. Everything he's done before this was all behind-the-scenes featurettes and stuff. So he obviously learned a lot.
He was actually David Fincher's protege for a while.
Oh, yeah.
I could kind of see that in some of some of the stylistic choices that he chooses. I could see the David Fincher influence.
Yeah, for sure. And it's based on a graphic novel from Boom Studios by Cullen Bunn. It stars James Badge Dale, awesome protagonist, and carries this film. He plays James. He was in Hold the Dark. It was a Jeremy Saulnier movie, really good. Now I want to see Standoff at Sparrow Creek because I keep passing that movie up and not watching it. Now that I know that he's in it, this guy is in it, I want to watch it. And he also had a small part in The Departed. And also a co-star is Marin Ireland. She plays Nora, and she was just in Dark and the Wicked. So she was in two awesome movies back to back.
That's where she was from. Okay, all right, perfect.
Sasha Frolova plays Amanda. Samantha Logan from All American, the TV show on Netflix, plays Devara. And Stephen Root has a great appearance in this as Arthur. He's the guy from Office Space, King of the Hill, and he was in Mr. Robot. He plays an awesome, I guess you could call him cult leader. It's really complicated, but you'll see as we discuss it.
Yeah.
So the synopsis is: a former cop is on the trail of a missing girl when he discovers that a secretive group are attempting to summon a terrifying supernatural entity. Right away, it opens in the stark, beautiful woods location, and it already starts building tension from the first frame. We get to know these group of characters at the beginning, and we get to know them so well, and there's so much time spent with this first group of characters. We think we're going to follow them through the whole thing because you're really invested in their ordeal. But they only set the events into motion. And then you got that cave location with this great skeleton sculpture that gives you the creeps. The locations are great. The camera work is great.
For anybody who's watching this right now, this is only going to be for our YouTube audience. Move out of the way for a second, Michael, and show them. There we go. That's what we're in.
That's the sculpture right there.
Yes.
It looks all detailed and creepy, and the camera angles of it really brings you into it and makes you feel the creepiness of it. And it starts building the mystery right away, and we see things that will permeate throughout the entire story. We see these ominous images, and they keep like flashing throughout the rest of the story. It kind of brings the story full circle. And then you have these shocking events. It's almost like a little mini climax right before the title. So you're like, 20 minutes in, and you're invested in all these characters, and all of a sudden this huge shocking moment, and then the title comes up. I love stuff like that, where it kind of throws a curveball at you. So then after this whole opening sequence, then we meet the protagonist, James. And as soon as he's on screen, the story grounds itself immediately. He feels like a real person. It feels like a real town. He's interacting with real people. And then I love the score. I love the ebb and flow of the score. Like all the part of you're establishing the protagonist, you're establishing the setting, the town, and everything, and the people in it. And there's this Chopin type of piano music playing that really kind of sets a somber mood, and it sets this, I call it a score motif, where different things in the score, like this Chopin type of piano, kind of comes up every time the drama comes up in the movie. So there's like an ebb and flow in the score that I really like, and we'll discuss the score later. And then on top of this great score, you got really good natural dialogue that it naturally brings up, like existential topics, that like stuff like we manifest both the good and the bad in our lives. It brings these existential topics up so effortlessly in the conversation, and it seems like a real conversation. It doesn't seem like these people are trying to enrich the story or say good dialogue. It's just like real people talking about existential things. And all the strategic extreme close-up shots really pull you into this world. Like you're watching this guy go along, and you're wondering how this is going to pan out, and then all these extreme close-ups kind of bring you into this world and keep you grounded with him and keep you following everything that he does. And then you start to see the legend of this empty man. So you get this whole folklore of the empty man told within a flashback. And in any other movie, that would have been the whole story, but it just scratches the surface of what the empty man is all about. So you really think you're being fed this folklore of this entity, but you really just know just a fraction of what you're going to know by the end of it. I love the whole day 1, day 2, day 3 thing. So every time the empty man gets a beat on you, basically, so day 1, you think about him. Day 2, you see him. And day 3, he comes after you. So every character that the empty man latches onto, you see their day 1 and their day 2 and their day 3. And each time it kind of ratchets up the tension, because you know what's going to happen on each day, and you just sit waiting and wondering how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And then you start getting the cult woven into the story. Another effortless part of both the acting and the dialogue and everything kind of weaves the story and the mystery, and kind of presents you with questions, and then answers those questions, and then you find out that those questions just open up more questions. I love that in a mystery. And then it brings us to the steam room scene. I love this steam room scene. I'm not going to say too many details about it, but it's an excellent kill, great effects and camera work. I love all the set pieces in this. And every time, I love in this movie that every time a plot point is revealed, you think you know what's going on. And so does the main character. And then it goes deeper. So every time you think you got it all figured out, every time the main character thinks he has everything figured out, it goes deeper. And that's what makes me think that this movie is all about perspective. So I think a lot of the audience thought this was going to be from the perspective of the teens, which there's a group of teens that this guy is investigating. So he's basically close with his neighbor. His neighbor's daughter goes missing, so he goes looking for her amongst her group of friends. So then you see in the flashback how the group of friends came to have the empty man latch onto them. And as you find all this out, I started thinking about, if we followed this group of teens, if we were looking at this story through the perspective of one of the teens, it very well could have been a teen Scream with your standard urban legend type of story behind it. But we follow this very complicated character who's investigating the incidents. He's kind of a family friend who's kind of outside looking in, and it gives it a whole new perspective and a whole new depth, especially where his story goes. And then he has these dreams throughout that kind of strengthen both the story and the atmosphere. I love all his dreams. They seem to be strategically placed in the story to add to the tension and to add to the main character's confusion and his own tension and stress with what he's going through. And then we get to everything. So far I was enjoying quite a bit, but it didn't stand out to me as like, this is something special. So about halfway through the movie, we start getting into these moments that I think personally solidify this as an instant classic, not just another good new horror film. I think it's an instant classic. And the first moment that solidified this movie as an instant classic for me is when Arthur, played by Stephen Root, the cult leader, he finishes his sermon, and the sermon was already impressive.
I love him in this movie, by the way.
Oh yeah, his sermon already pulls you in. So then James comes to talk to him afterwards because he mentions the empty man. So they start talking about the empty man. You think it's going to be one thing, and then it turns into another all through Stephen Root's monologue, where the story opens further than I could have imagined. And then he says this thing like he's trying to explain what the empty man is. And he says, think about this. If you say your own name enough times, it becomes gibberish. So when it becomes gibberish, which is more real, your name or the gibberish? And he said, that's where empty man lies.
See, I kind of understood that because I'll admit it right now on the podcast, I'm a little autistic. So I have this tendency to repeat words in my head to the point where they just sound like drivel and they become meaningless and they become nonsense, and I fall into this kind of existential state where I was like, is this even a word? What does it mean? Is it just random syllables that we strung together and put meaning onto? But if you really, really think about it, they're just noises that you're making. There's nothing significant about it. So I've actually done that before a lot through my life. So I can relate a little bit to what he's talking about right there.
And he ties that into the old saying that if you stare into an abyss long enough, the abyss stares back at you. Mm-hmm. And so, just that whole conversation and the acting and the camera shots and the way everything unfolded just gave me chills throughout that whole scene. Like, wow, this is so cool.
So I have a lot to say about this movie because one, it was like you mentioned, it was a bomb when it came out. It's actually already, its cult classic status is already started. There's already articles like online being written about this film and how it's already starting to slowly discover its audience. And this is one of those things where I can't really fault the studio, because it's not that a lot of times when studios have issues with movies or they don't know how to market it right, it's just because it's usually bad management. Here, this is a film that's really difficult to market for a lot of different reasons. It's very ambitious. It's more ambitious than most of what you would refer to as elevated horror, something like Hereditary or The Witch. So I don't think it's as good as those movies. It's quite a bit more ambitious and far-reaching in terms of what it's aiming for. And I think this is one of those movies that has to, and it's already happening, has to slowly discover, has to find its audience very slowly. And I think the audience is slowly starting to come to see this film. I actually don't think, I actually like this movie quite a bit. I do have some criticisms of it, and I'd rather get them out of the way up front, because I actually really dug this movie a lot, and I actually want to see a lot more horror movies like this. One of the criticisms might just be me, to be quite honest. I wasn't fully satisfied by the ending of the film or where it led to at the end, but I don't know if I can say that it's a bad ending, because I feel like I need to rewatch it again. I feel like there's something more that if I watch this a few more times, I'm going to get a little bit more out of it. There was a part in the middle where I think it sagged a little bit, where it was like a 15-minute lull. But everything else about this movie was engrossing. If you separated the opening sequence, which you talked about, which is 23 minutes long, if you separated that from the rest of the movie, that would be a kick-ass short horror film all on itself before we even get to anything else. It's a deeply engrossing movie. I don't know how to describe it. It draws you in very slowly. It's very creepy. It's very atmospheric, though I don't know how to describe it. It's atmospheric without calling attention to itself in a way as something like The Dark and the Wicked or The Witch or Hereditary is. where I would describe it as atmospheric, but I don't want to mislead the audience to that. Its atmosphere, I think, is a little bit more subtle and subdued and a little bit more mysterious versus that outright intense feeling that something's wrong. I guess the feeling is not that something is wrong, but something is amiss, something is afoot where you can't really put your finger on what it is. And there's like a quietness to the film. I really dig the pacing of it. It's never in a rush. It plays out its story beats at a very leisurely pace for the most part. And I think that's why I didn't get as satisfied at the ending. I felt like the ending kind of sped along a little bit much because it had built so slowly. I actually, in a weird way, I actually think that the ending of this movie could have been longer. I think it could have been extended out another 15, 20 minutes to really flesh it out. But then again, that's the problem with making movies this long. So I think there's a lot of ambition, and I felt like it falters here and there. But for the most part, this really lands for me. And I think it's going to find a big audience as the years go by. And I get the feeling that the more I watch it, the more my opinion of it is going to be elevated, because it really caught me off guard. It doesn't feel like anything modern in horror that I've seen recently. It has a feeling that's all its own. And I think that's probably what made this a very difficult film to market or to explain to people. To explain to people what you're in for, because I think even some people who like what you would call elevated horror, I hate that fucking term, would probably not some. I think some of the fans of that might not like this. I don't know how to put my finger on it, but it's something that's unique that I don't really think exists in horror at this point. I think it's occasionally a little bit too ambitious, but we need more ambitious horror films like that, and not ambitious like big budget It movie ambitious where it's like glossy. This is ambitious in a more independent kind of way, in a more defiant kind of way. I think the filmmaking is really great. I really dig the lead performance. I really dug this movie a lot in spite of some of the flaws I found with it. I think this movie is going to end up having a big cult audience as the years go by. And I think that what you said about being a classic is already kind of starting to take foot with more people discovering it. And you got to admit, that's pretty cool, because this movie didn't come out that long ago when it flopped in theaters. Its cult classic status is already growing faster than most films that garner a cult classic status.
Yeah, it definitely deserves it. And I actually didn't feel any lulls in this. It was more like, to me, it was building tension, and then it would build tension to a point where is this going? And then it gives you a little bit of the story. Ooh, that's where it's going. And it gets you more excited to get to the next level. So it never felt slow to me. It always felt like everything was building on the story. Everything was building on the atmosphere. Everything was building to that climax. And I actually got so excited at the climax, especially the second time. This is another one that got better on the second time watching it. And it's such a complex story. I actually had to watch it a second time to analyze everything that I loved about it. Because the first time I watched it, I was so surprised, and it was so unique, the way it made me feel and the way the story unfolded, that I spent most of my time wondering what was going to happen next. But then when I watched it again and I didn't spend my time wondering what was going to happen next, I could really recognize the craft that went into it and all the different elements that make it special, like like when he's snooping around the cult complex, and that thick tension builds, with, like you said, without calling attention to itself. And then the score like slowly builds. The score is phenomenal to me in this. It's never one note. It's always, you see other score motifs appearing again in the story later on. It's just all so well put together and so well constructed. And all the set design, all the sets throughout, the lighting on the sets. And then it comes to the I mentioned the other scene that I thought made it an instant cult classic. The second scene that does that for me is the people dancing around the bonfire. It's got what looks like almost 100 people like packed in tight, close together, and they're kind of like weirdly dancing and kind of jumping up, kind of dancing up and down in this flow, and they almost look like water kind of movement. And then he's kind of watching them from the woods, and it's like, it's strange, it's scary, it's ominous, it's original. I've never seen anything quite like that before.
Definitely original. That's for
Yeah.
sure. It's not like any horror movie that's out right now, and it definitely goes for something different. And again, I really think that's what made this movie a hard sell, is that it's hard to pin down what type of horror you would call it. Where it's definitely a horror movie, but it's hard to pin down what type of horror movie you would classify this as. It almost seems to exist completely on its own in terms of being a horror film.
Well, for me, most horror films you see are either mostly about story,
Mm-hmm.
and I love horror films that are mostly about story. Other horror films are mostly about the horror. I love those type of horror films. And other horror films are mostly about the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very rare that a horror film balances all three, and this one does. It's heavy on story, heavy on the horror, heavy on the atmosphere, all of it all together in one movie. And I said last week how I love how characters make smart decisions
Mm-hmm.
in trying to figure out a mystery. Well, with this one, he kind of went headlong into the cult, not knowing what was going on, and he didn't know the danger he was putting himself in. So it almost seemed like a dumb move, kind of running headlong into the cult. And then he tried a smarter way to infiltrate the cult by kidnapping one of them. I thought that was the way all that played out was really cool. And then that comes to the third scene that I thought made it an instant classic. Toward the end, right before the big climax, when he's questioning the nurse about the guy that's in a coma, and she's kind of reluctant at first to give any details, and then she slowly starts acting a little strange. It's real subtle. She starts acting a little strange, and the dialogue gets a little stranger, and then that goes into him going into the room. I had chills, big goosebumps coming up on my arms in that scene. So good. It just comes out of nowhere. He just innocently asking this
I do.
questions, and then it turns, ugh.
Again, I need to watch it again, and I do like the climax, but I actually think I really think that it could have benefited for about maybe 10, 15 extra minutes tacked onto the climax and just let it play out at a slower rate, only because the movie feels so patient up until that point that it feels like it's starting to go at a pace that it never had during the rest of the movie. And again, a lot of this has to do with time constraints, because studios are only going to allow you to make a horror movie at a certain length for so long, and this one is already pretty long. But I could have used a little bit more on the climax, though. I do find it interesting where it goes, and I have to admit I need to see it at least once more before I can fully quantify how I feel about the climax, because it's a movie that keeps you so I don't know if off guard. It kind of keeps throwing you off as to where it's headed throughout the whole movie, that when watching it the first time, you spend a lot of your time trying to figure out where it's going and kind of getting like, okay, where's this going? Where's this going? So I need that second experience like you had, knowing where it's going and just letting it in and appreciating where it's headed.
I really felt it more on the second viewing, how that it's kind of an ebb and flow throughout, and then the tension builds, and then the story is like this. It's building, and then it gets faster, and then there's these little nuggets in between to get you excited and keep you compelled. And then it gets to that climax, and boom, 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 one thing after another, and it gets like, instead of fizzling out, the tension builds faster and heavier throughout the climax. And I loved it because I didn't think it was possible for the tension and the atmosphere to get any heavier, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I would just, and that final twist is a mind blower, where everything comes full circle and you see what everything was all about, and all the secrets are all revealed in that final scene. It blew my mind.
Also, it's not going to be for every horror fan. If you're looking for a more straightforward horror film, this is not it. This is most definitely not straightforward in any way. So I think if you're like a horror fan who just likes the simple, basic formulas of slasher movies, or just your simple possession story or another Slender Man kind of story, you're probably going to walk away from this feeling really irritated if you go in expecting that. This is quite a bit more ambitious than most horror these days, than most movies these days, actually, really. And I think what makes this cool is that it's aiming so high in terms of the existential themes and ideas that are swimming in this movie, that it very easily could have turned pretentious or could have been really off-putting. and it never crosses that line at any point. It feels like it could at any point where, like, if this goes too far in a weird direction, it's going to start to look dumb and pretentious, but it never does. It manages to stay over just that line to keep itself just feeling like a deeply ambitious horror film. It's pretty epic in terms of the story too, even though it feels very, very intimate. Also, recommendations might seem weird due to the circumstances I watched this under. I had to watch it on a laptop with headphones, and I actually think that kind of helped the experience, which I normally don't like doing with movies. But because the laptop was so close in my face and because I had headphones on, it felt more intimate, especially every scene when they're whispering in each other's ears like that. Yeah. Having that headphones on and having it loud, like directly in my ears, probably got under my skin a lot more than if I had just, because we've seen stuff like that, people like whispering something creepy in your ears. But I'm telling you, with headphones and it up close, those moments are a little bit more effective, and it actually kind of made me a little uncomfortable when I heard, because when I heard all that whispering go directly into my eardrums like that, it was kind of maddening.
Yeah, but the way the whispering's so turned up, and you can feel the bass of the whispering, even though it's like a slight whisper, you can barely hear what they're saying. It makes you feel uneasy, and I can imagine it probably felt like they were right there in your ear whispering.
Yeah, that's why I liked it, but I didn't like it because I felt like one of the characters. I felt like somebody was like inside my ear whispering menacing things to me, so that made me uncomfortable. So I don't necessarily recommend watching movies on laptops, but this is one of those cases where I don't think a laptop and the headphones might have helped it a little bit, and I felt very intimate with the film, very close to it.
And that's so crazy that the second film we're going to talk about is the first whole film I ever sat there and watched on my laptop.
Oh, you watched the second film on your laptop?
Yeah, because my wife was working in the other room when I had to watch it, so I had to put some headphones in.
Interesting. Oh, okay.
And that kind of heightened that experience for me too. It's weird.
Yeah, it did.
But I have to talk about the music in The Empty Man. In a lesser film, this score would have stuck out like a sore thumb. It would have stuck out as being amazing and being something that carried the whole film. But there are so many elements in that mixed in with the effectiveness of the score. I think it kind of blended in a lot. So I really noticed that on the second time around, and I didn't look into who did the score until after I watched it, and I was not surprised when I found out who did it. The music was by Christopher Young and Lustmord. I don't know if you've heard of Lustmord, but he goes all the way back. He's so old that I had Lustmord playing on my MySpace profile.
Really?
He does these ominous, creepy soundscapes.
Mm-hmm.
He does. It's almost like ambient music. It's almost like a scary version of ambient music, and I've always loved him. So it's great seeing that he done this score. But Christopher Young did the score for Sinister. Fucking amazing score. It's one of the best scores I've heard in the last 20 years. He did the score for Sinister, for Drag Me to Hell, for the Grudge remake, Tales from the Hood, Hellraiser 1 and 2, and Trick or Treat was just a few of the films that he scored.
Okay, so he's one of the best horror composers, period.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Lustmord did the score for The Void, for Vacancy, Idle Hands, Bride of Chucky, From Dusk Till Dawn, and The Crow.
Oh,
so if you're wondering why the score was so great, these two guys are why. And that's how you make an excellent, effective horror film. Hire guys like this to do your score. Holy shit, what a score that was.
I agree. But yeah, it's one of those movies where I get what you mean, but it's weird because when I was watching it, I never thought that the score ever called too much attention to itself. And I'm thinking about it, it seemed to just kind of slot in with the rest of the movie and the vibe that the movie was going for and the atmosphere that it had. And it's really indescribable how the feeling this movie gives you, because I really mean it when I say this is a very subdued horror movie, but that doesn't make it not creepy or not scary at any point, where its atmosphere is a little bit hard to pin down how you would describe it, because its atmosphere isn't like most films that have horror films that have a thick, heavy atmosphere. So if you compare this something to like The Dark and the Wicked, which feels like it's operating overtly with the atmosphere and trying to get on under your skin at every moment. This one is more like, instead of getting under your skin at every moment, it's almost like it's beckoning to call you to get lost further into the mystery with the main character. That's the best way to describe it. The atmosphere is so subdued, but just creepy enough. It's like falling into a forest where you can't stop traveling further and further. Something keeps drawing you into it like that. And in that sense, I think the movie has a very unique feel to it.
Yeah, I was so surprised and blown away by every aspect of it. I was really taken aback by that one.
It also got pretty negative reviews when it came out, but its reviews have actually gotten more positive as more people have started to discover it in the past few months. It's really taking on a life of its own pretty fast. And I think what helps is the empty man. That title is creepy, it's intriguing, and let's be honest, the fact that it's so similar sounding to the Slender Man is going to draw people in, period.
Yeah.
Though you might want to manage your expectations, because this is not a Slender Man teen Scream, although there are teens involved in it. And here's another thing. I didn't know that it was advertised like that, or that's what people thought it was going to be. So I was never disappointed, because I never went into this film expecting it to be a teen Scream or expecting it to be about teenagers or anything like that. I kind of went into this with a little bit of a blank slate. So I'm happy that I didn't have any expectations when I first saw it.
And it's funny because there was a group of teenagers and an urban legend and everything, but it just done it completely different than any of the others.
Yeah. And to be honest, we've seen that movie a million times, so I don't really think it's that big of a deal that we didn't follow the teenagers. They're in it enough.
Yeah.
They're in it enough. They contribute what they need to. It adds a lot of creepy shit to the film. It adds some of the scariest scenes, but it doesn't. I think it's better. This is more of an adult film. That's the way I put it. I appreciate that it follows adult characters a little bit. So it's a little bit more sophisticated than just teenagers running around getting hacked up by some mysterious urban legend ghost. I think there's a lot more going on to this. And Stephen Root, who also wasn't he Mr. Armitage in Get Out?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was Mr. Armitage in Get Out. I already got a bad feeling when I saw him in the movie, just because I will forever associate him with being the blind man in Get Out, who comes across friendly but has really sinister intentions behind that. I'm pretty sure his role in Get Out is what got him cast in this movie.
Yeah, and he's one of those cult leaders that makes the cult sound really cool, like you want to be a part of it.
Yeah, really cool. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. For like I said, I have some minor complaints here and there, and I think any complaints that I have or the flaws that I perceive as of the first viewing are a result of it being a very ambitious horror film. And again, I'd rather have ambitious horror films than horror movies that don't try shit.
Yeah, and after just one movie, I'm gonna watch anything that David Pryor does from now on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, me too. Let's hope that this movie garners a big enough cult following that studios will start to have a little bit more faith in his vision next time around. So now that we know what he's after and what he's going for, let's hope a studio doesn't mismanage whatever his next project is. But then again, I have to admit, I would have a hard time figuring out how you would market a movie like this. So even the studios, I can't blame as much as I normally would.
True. It's definitely a hard to market one.
Yeah, it's for horror fans, but it's not for every horror fan. It's elevated horror, but it's not quite The Witch or Hereditary. It's all of those things that make it hard to pin down is what makes it a hard sell, I think, to general audiences. Like, well, what is it? What are we in for? It's like, just watch the damn movie and you'll see.
Yeah, because it's also what makes it special.
Yeah, it's also what makes it special. And let's be honest, let's stop expecting movies to be made based on how they're going to be marketed. That is not a good way to approach filmmaking, is to worry about how it's going to be marketed. So give this one a chance. I think a lot of people will enjoy it, especially if you're into more sophisticated horror films. It's playing on HBO Max, kick-ass app, so please check it out. I think it's totally worth it.
And they actually moved it over to just HBO now, so it's also available just on HBO as well as the HBO Max app.
Okay, so any form of HBO, you can check it out.
Highly recommended.
Highly.
And that brings us to another one I'm very excited to talk about this week, Blood Red Sky from 2021. Written and directed by German director Peter Thorwarth, and he wrote the story with Stefan Holtz. It stars Perry Baumeister as Nadja, the mom, Carl Anton Koch as Elias, the son. Boy, does that boy act his ass off in this movie. I haven't seen acting like that from a kid in a long time. You got Alexander Shear as 8-Ball, great villain. Case Seti as Farid, the savior of the movie, and Dominic Purcell as one of the terrorists. He was one of the few American guys in this. He was from Prison Break, and he's also Mick Rory / Heatwave in all the DC films and TV shows. It's about a woman with vampirism and her son board a transatlantic flight to New York on her way to be cured, and she is forced into action when a band of ruthless terrorists hijack the plane. It's German, English, and Arabic are all spoken in this movie, and it's such a great mixture of accents and dialogue that I found myself forgetting that I was reading subtitles. Those long stretches of the movie where I just forgot that there was subtitles. I would just automatically read them subconsciously.
I actually forgot too. I was in a position where, and I'm not somebody who complains about subtitles in movies. In fact, people who like complain about having to sit through subtitles in movies usually get on my nerves. Get some fucking culture in your life. But I was kind of frazzled when I first watched this. So when I turned it, I was like, subtitles, not right now, damn it. But like, I actually forgot that I was watching a movie with subtitles, and I think my brain just kind of made it sound like English. That after a certain point, I forgot I was watching a foreign language film.
Yeah, and it feels like you know what they're saying without even reading the subtitles.
A lot of it's visually driven. So another thing that helps is that there's dialogue in it and there's exposition, but it's not an exposition heavy film. I think a lot of what makes the best elements of it are driven by visual storytelling and the adrenaline you get out of a lot of the situations happening on screen. So if that turns you off, don't worry. This is not a movie where you're going to have to be sitting reading dialogue. And then a lot of the characters speak English in here too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of English spoken in here too. But it's one of those cases where I even forgot I was reading subtitles at some point.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of Sputnik, where Sputnik was more of a sci-fi monster movie. But as far as how it's a foreign movie that oozes quality from the opening scene, and it feels very much like a polished blockbuster almost. So it's almost a little more shocking when you see this very graphic horror violence in it and vampires. It almost seems out of place because it's so such good quality and such good filmmaking, where it's already a riveting thriller before the vampires even show up. And I love how it opens because it drops you right in the middle of the story as the plane lands. So everything's kind of already happened, and then you go back to see what happens from the beginning, and then you pick up where you left off with after the plane lands, which gets even more exciting. But it endears you to the characters right away and advances the story without spoon feeding it to you. When the terrorists come in, you're already compelled. You're already pulled into the story of the mom and her son, and then when the terrorists come, the standout performances from all the villains really grabs you right away and really makes it more exciting, because you feel like these are real terrorists. You feel like they're real people. They don't have some cliche motive. They have a really complex type of cool motive that they're going for. I love all the lighting and the color correction, and pretty much every scene had this depth to it where you could reach out, where it feels like you could just walk into the screen. Like it's this world that's sitting there in your living room. And there's, as you can expect, there's going to be a standoff because you got a mom in here protecting her kid, and she's turning into a vampire, and you have terrorists. Of course, you're going to have a standoff between the vampire mom and the terrorists. And then the standoffs don't go anything like you think they're going to. And every level of it was exciting for me. All the flashbacks really bring a lot to the story. And then even the flashbacks have a climax that's exciting. So you're kind of cutting back and forth between the action on the plane And then you see the backstory of the mom of her becoming a vampire and everything that happened in her backstory to lead up to getting on the plane. And that climax was even exciting. There's that really cool scene underneath in the cargo hold of the plane with the car, where the car is set on fire. There's a big showdown right there. That was a really cool scene. One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. I hope it doesn't give too much away, but the mom tells her little boy that she wants to sacrifice herself, and there's very good reason why she should sacrifice herself. So she gets in this big argument with her son. I believed every word the son was saying. I believe that he was desperate and sad and emotional that his mom wanted to kill herself, and they got in this big argument. He runs off. That was one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie. Is really powerful. And also a little later when she's going wild and she's going full vamp and he's trying to tame her, I actually shed some tears in that scene. So another thing I liked about this movie is there's this big climax on the plane, right? So everything leading up to what we've seen in that first scene, that's all a whole big story that culminates at the landing of the plane. So you get almost a whole movie right there and a climax. And then when you pick up from that first scene, it's thrills on top of thrills on top of thrills, and it all feels grounded. No matter how many vampires show up, no matter how many heads get ripped, and no matter how much gore is in your face, it always feels grounded and always feels like these are real events happening. So overall, I thought it was intelligent and intense plane hijacking film, and without which would have been compelling and interesting without the vampires. But surprisingly, when the vampires are added, they don't just add excitement and action to the story, they add depth, drama, plus the action and the suspense and the tension to the story, instead of, vamps just thrown into an action thriller. Because it could have very well been that. It could have very well been, okay, let's just do a hijack film and throw vamps into the equation. But it all mixed together and is all woven together very expertly as far as I'm concerned. And I can't decide which one I like better, this or Empty Man, but I think I like the Empty Man just a little bit more, where I think they're both on the same level as far as quality, but I think this one, Blood Red Sky, leans toward the action and the visceral horror, where the other one leans more towards story and character development.
Which is why I would also prefer the Empty Man. So this is a movie I actually liked as well, though I didn't like it as much as you did, and I don't like it as much as the Empty Man. And I think it's because after a while, I actually think this is, for the most part, this is actually a really exciting, engrossing movie. I think it adds a lot to the vampire genre, because I don't know if I've ever seen a vampire movie with this type of scenario, or the blending of terrorism and hijacking with vampire mythos. I think is a pretty compelling combination. I just felt like, because this movie was such intensity, I think towards the last 20 minutes, this could just be a personal thing. This could be me. I felt kind of burnt out by all the intensity of everything leading up, that the last 20 minutes didn't land for me as much as I wanted it to. Mostly because I felt my nerves were fried by the time it reached that point, because it goes into such heavy overdrive. I actually felt the adrenaline pumping. And again, this is all very personal and subjective. This movie actually gave me a lot of palpable anxiety through most of the running time, that by the time it reaches its last 20 minutes, I was kind of exhausted. I was like, okay, I've had enough. I need you to slow down a little bit, or calm down, because I'm feeling overwhelmed. But despite my complaints that I think it goes a little bit, it could have used a little bit more ebb and flow, it did get me pretty engrossed the majority of the running time. I think the relationships are pretty realistic. I thought it was a pretty original approach to make a film, a kind of a terrorist hijacking film, to throw in the vampire elements to it. I think there's a good emotional grounding in here. I just wish that it would have slowed down a little bit more here and there. That's probably my biggest issue with it, is that I just could have used a little bit more ebb and flow. Again, I would actually give this movie a second chance, just to see if I feel differently on another viewing. But yeah, it's definitely one of the most original vampire movies I've seen in a while. one of the great things about the genre is that you can reinvent it in so many ways, and I think this is another one that kind of shows you how you can reinvent it or how you could push it in different directions. And that
I
little
see.
boy can act his fucking ass off, dude. That kid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the kid's career plans are if he even wants to be an actor, but like, I can see that kid growing up to being quite something if he sticks to it. Again, if he wants to. I don't believe in putting pressure on kids for acting, but that little kid can act his ass off.
Yeah, you're really invested in his story and his plight, and then you believe him when he's upset. You believe him when he's the hero. I think that's even hard than getting someone to believe that you're upset, is getting someone to believe that you're a believable hero. And he was that final scene.
Yeah.
What he does in that final scene, I was there for every bit of it. And I see exactly what you mean, how it's exhausting. Because in a way it's exhausting, but to me that's what's good about it. Is it's exhausting, like you almost want it to end at one point, and then it has a whole nother section to go, and it's all this tense pounding at you.
I think that's what I kind of felt when I felt it. I felt so overwhelmed. I was like, okay, dude, I've gotten more than enough excitement than I get in 5 movies usually.
Yeah.
So you can bring it down a little bit. But again, I would watch it again just because I watched it in a frazzled mind state. But it's very well made. I cannot say that it's very well made. It's very well acted. It's pretty original, and it blends 2 genres that you normally don't see blended together. Fairly ambitious, so not quite as ambitious as The Empty Man. It's definitely worth checking out. But I just think that The Empty Man had something that stuck with me a little bit further. I think it just lodged itself into my brain a little bit more than this one did.
But don't you think that both this and The Empty Man had this confident filmmaking, where you're in capable hands? This writer and director knows what they're doing. I had that feeling in both these movies.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Very good vampire film. And I also think it's also good if you're into action films. I don't think I even think that if horror isn't your thing, but if you like action or adrenaline movies that get your adrenaline going, you'll definitely like this one as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's an adrenaline rush for sure.
Say it's almost action horror, almost, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because there's very few
is
lulls in it. I mean, the lulls last like
a minute,
just
maybe
a few seconds.
like a few seconds. And I'll go to them. The villains, particularly the one. Well, I don't want to ruin it, but the most psychotic one are pretty loathsome people, and they're easy to root against.
Yeah, I love how 8-Ball is kind of the crazy one, and even his partners are kind of sick of how crazy he is.
It's too psychotic.
Yeah, and then of course he ends up being the biggest threat.
Mm-hmm.
I like the whole dynamic between the terrorists. I like the dynamic between the protagonists and that stupid drunk Irish guy.
And also some of the passengers too. This movie, I'll give them that. That's impressive. It managed to add believable characters that are not. I mean, they're all part of the narrative, but some of the passengers ended up giving pretty giving good performances, and you ended up caring about some of the people on that flight more than just the mom and her son. I feel like a lot of characters that you end up caring about throughout the movie.
And it mimicked that feeling that you get in airports and on planes, where it's all these strangers like packed together in this box flying across the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you meet some of them, it's got that same feeling, like that. What are these people all about? And everybody has their own dynamic and their own reactions to the horror, and it's really cool.
Yeah. So definitely both are worth checking out, but I'd say The Empty Man is the one that I think is going to have legs. I think that over the years its reputation is going to grow stronger and stronger, and like I said, the cult for it is already growing.
Yeah, I think that The Empty Man is just so complex, and it handles so many different aspects of it so uniquely and competently. It's just very impressive. Very impressive.
So those were the 2 new movies that we wanted to catch our audience up with. Now we got to update you on our Horror Tubi Roulette. So this is the part of the podcast. We do this every so often. Our regular viewers know this. We go to Tubi TV, the free movie app, scroll to the horror section, close our eyes, scroll, kind of like the Wheel of Fortune, wherever it stops, that's the movie you have to watch for the week. Good or bad, and there's quite a bit of bad in there. I'm happy to report back. I actually enjoyed the one that I watched. I thought it was
cool.
I thought I ended up being a good movie. I didn't have high hopes for it, but it ended up being pretty, not perfect, but a pretty engrossing film.
Well, as the months go by, it seems that Tubi gets more and more impressive with the stuff they add, and there's more and more stuff that you can't get anywhere else besides Tubi. So all you people run around pirating everything and complaining about not having enough access to movies, go to Tubi. It's free. You get very few commercials, and they have a damn good selection. Sure, there's a lot of filler in there because they put everything on there.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of gems in there. So that's why Horror Tubi Roulettes is always so much fun, because at first I liked it because I thought we were going to land on a bunch of bad movies. But then there's that chance, just like on a roulette wheel, there's a chance you'll get that really good one. And unfortunately, I didn't get that really good one this week.
So the one that I got was a little bit, is called The Awakening. It came out in 2011. This is the plot synopsis. In 1921, England is overwhelmed by the loss and grief of World War I. Hoax exposer Florence Cathcart visits a boarding school to explain sightings of a child ghost. Everything she believes unravels as the missing child begins to show themselves. This is directed by Nick Murphy. It was written by Stephen Volk and Nick Murphy and stars Rebecca Hall, Dominic West, and Imelda Staunton. Yeah, this is kind of a highbrow horror film. That's how I would describe it. And I think anything that's a period piece in horror automatically becomes highbrow. And I think the fact that it takes place in a snotty boarding school with upper class people makes it even more highbrow. But it's a very enveloping movie. I think the mystery at the center of it all is very engrossing. The acting performances are solid. This is another one. Maybe it's just me this week. I think it's a little bit overlong for what it is. I think we could have cut 20 minutes out of it. But it's a lot of creepy scenes that play out throughout the movie. A lot of interesting dynamics that happen in here. All of the actors deliver pretty well, and it goes in places that you don't expect it to go, and it kind of upends a lot of where you think it's gonna be headed. I was very surprised by this one because a lot of the times when I go through these Tubi TV selections, I expect them to be bad movies. This one was surprisingly pretty good, and I'm actually surprised I never heard it before and that it went under the radar. I think it's the kind of horror film that just missed its mark in terms of when it was released. I think this would have had a bigger audience if this was released like post The Witch and post Hereditary for people who are looking for higher concept, a more highbrow, or I guess sophisticated horror films. I think this movie would have had a little bit more popularity had it come out a little bit earlier. But I dug this one. There's a couple of moments that genuinely creeped me out. I don't know, maybe it was because I had low expectations for it, but I ended up really digging this one, and I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that one, but I remember it being really slow, but it's one of those where you feel the slow burn, but you don't care because it's so good.
Yeah, it's definitely like that. And it's I think there's a good handful of horror films like this or The Lords of Salem that would appeal to a specific type of horror audience that has grown more since the A24 brand of horror has kind of taken off with The Witch and Hereditary. So I think if you enjoy those types of horror films, you should definitely, like The Empty Man, you should definitely give this one a chance because I think it's worth watching. And I think it kind of flew under the radar. I had never heard of it before up until this point, but I think it was a pleasant surprise. Good movie.
Nice. Well, I didn't have such great luck. It wasn't terrible luck, but Don't Blink was okay. It was a very, very mixed bag. It's Don't Blink from 2014. It's written and directed by Travis Oates. This is his first feature film. And he's actually Piglet from the Winnie the Pooh films. He's the voice of Piglet.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't Blink.
Like Piglet, don't make any more horror films. No, that's me.
All right, so I actually thought this was going to be a ripoff of last time when you got this movie, it was going to be a ripoff of Don't Breathe just because of the title, but I guess it's not. It came out 2 years after this.
No, it would have been better if it was a ripoff of Don't Breathe.
Really? So what's wrong with it?
So this one stars Brian Austin Green. And that might be one of the things wrong with it. It stars Brian Austin Green.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, I like the guy. He's a decent actor and everything. He just seems so hokey to me. He just seems so. I always think Beverly Hills 90210. I just think of that silly character every time I see him. That's unfair to him, but anyway. It stars Brian Austin Green, Mena Suvari from American Beauty and American Pie. And by far the best actor in this is Zach Ward. He's that redhead that was in Freddy versus Jason, and he was a little kid in the Christmas Story, that little redhead kid with freckles. And he was also in Friday the 13th, the series. And then two really good character actresses were in Joanne Kelly and Fiona Gubelman. So Zach Ward, Joanne Kelly, and Fiona Gubelman were too good for this movie, basically. It's about 10 people arrive at a secluded mountain resort and find it completely deserted. So stranded with no gas to get back down the mountain, they must investigate why everyone disappeared. And I think this movie they should change the name of it to Don't Blink or You'll Miss Mena Suvari. Because they put her on the cover of the damn movie. She's gone within 5 minutes. She barely has like 3 lines. And then she disappears. So it's a very uninteresting take on the 10 Little Indians story, yawn. And they kind of just start disappearing. And that's really all there is to it. They disappear one by one, and you deal with, and how they deal with it in between. It opens up with a John Denver song to show us that we're in the mountains, followed by a discussion of John Denver.
That sounds funny. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh.
Like, what's going on?
Okay.
And then you get banter between 10 characters in multiple cars going up to this resort. So it gets more than a little jumbled right here. Because when we just did that script and we had somebody analyze it, and they told us, well, this is a lot of characters to go through. And this is a perfect example why you don't introduce too many characters in a short period of time. 10 characters in multiple cars we're getting to know. And we're getting to know them with useless banter.
Why is Mena Suvari at the top build in this then?
I know. And I thought for sure she was going to come back, but she disappears in the first few minutes and she's gone. and Brian Austin Green's banging her friend within 2 scenes. But the worst thing for me about the banter between the 10 characters and the cars going up is that the characters aren't that bad and the dialogue isn't that bad. So it's almost like mediocre. Like, it's getting to know all these people, and I don't really know them, and the ones I am getting to know I really don't care about. But they get to the cabin resort location, and the cabin resort location is really cool. It has a tree right in the middle of it. It looks really cool. It's kind of well lit. And then it starts these moments in the score where the score starts ratcheting up, and there's literally nothing going on visually to show that there should be some tension building. Nothing. It's just they're in a room, the camera's going from character to character, and all of a sudden score starts building up. And nothing happens. It's just score to try to say, oh, this is some fake atmosphere. but there's 20 minutes spent drilling it into your heads that this is an abandoned place. All right, we get it. They keep discovering things. Oh, they left their food here on the table. Oh, they just left the lights on. They just left the water running. Yeah.
It's a pretty short movie too. So would you describe it as padded?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
A lot of padding. Literally those 20 minutes of them walking around and realizing, oh, they just left this and walked out. This is abandoned. 20 minutes it took to show that.
And how long do you think it should have taken to establish that point?
Oh, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
They could have walked around 5 minutes and established that everybody disappeared suddenly. And then the don't blink. The words don't blink. Characters say it. It's written on the mirror. It's said again and again throughout the movie. Or shut the fuck up with the don't blink, dude.
So it's okay, overly exposition heavy.
So I see what they do. Like if you blink, somebody's gone, but it really doesn't make any sense to the plot or anything. And then on top of that, there's these awkward moments in drama, and then different male characters get aggressive out of nowhere. Like somebody disappears, and then one male character will get all mad and start raging against the others. I'm like, what? That person disappeared. Why are you raging against your friends? And then the other male character comes in, calm down, hey, calm down. Rrr. And then when he calms down, then the one that calmed him down gets all crazy and gets all aggro with everybody. So it just, the character interactions don't even make sense. So they're disappearing, they're attacking each other for it. And then, as I mentioned before, moments after Mina Savari disappears into thin air, Brian Austin Green starts crying. So then her friend is comforting him, and then they start kissing and they have sex. And then of course, right after they have sex, he turns around, look at the wall, and he turns back at her, and she's gone. Just useless scene after useless scene.
Okay. Go on. I'm gonna say something when you're done.
So, like 3/4 into the way of the movie, and finally some pretty decent moments come up. You see, it's basically this monotony of one character disappearing after another, and then it gets so monotonous that you're so used to seeing everybody disappear, and it becomes like, this is what this whole movie is all about. Nothing else is going to happen. So then when there's a knock on the door, you get excited. Ooh, something different. And then a character shows up, and there's a little bit of conflict there and a little bit of mystery. And then they just piss it away, and they go back to people disappearing again. And then it goes back into the monotony, because keep in mind, it's 10 characters that disappear one by one. So you're sitting there waiting for these people to disappear for a while. And then the same thing, it's a monotony of them disappearing one by one. And then the phone rings, and you get all excited. Oh, cool, maybe another twist. Maybe something's going to happen. But no, nothing comes of it. And then the redhead has some great acting moments, especially his death scene. If I could just watch this movie back again, I would just want to watch the movies with all the scenes with all the redhead guys. They're really the only decent ones. And then the final scene brings the pointlessness around full circle. I'll go ahead and say one person is left, and then she calls the cops earlier in the thing, and all the cops show up. So she blinks, she turns her head and turns around, and all the rescuers are gone. And then so then I thought, is this going somewhere? So some moments were pretty good, but nope, denied. It just gets right to the end where nothing happens outside of the premise. That's what I hated about Brightburn, and this was even worse than Brightburn. You look at the premise and you know exactly what's going to happen in this movie, and it's even dumber than the premise.
Okay, so this is a review on Letterboxd. This is just a couple of very brief reviews that I thought were amusing. I wish I could have blinked to the end of this movie. Another one of this really was 92 minutes of my life that I'll never get fucking back. Within 5 minutes, it was clear that this was going to be a piece of garbage. Boring and annoying. You get the point, though. Some of these reviews, I think you could have wished I could have blinked till the end of it. But yeah, it doesn't really sound very good based on how you described it. And it doesn't have very good reviews from people online either.
And when you're overly excited over a knock on the door, you know that something's going wrong with the narrative.
That's true. That's true.
So I lost again. I lost this week.
Well, remember, there are no winners and losers in Tubi Roulette, Michael.
But I honestly wish it would have been worse. You know what I mean? It might have been more entertaining if it was worse.
So you could have something to laugh at?
Yeah.
Instead,
it was just awful.
So I am on Tubi Roulette. Should I go first?
All right, go ahead.
All right. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rosemary's Baby, the miniseries. How long is this?
Oh.
Okay, do you want me to watch a whole season of television?
How long is it then? Is it like one of those like 3-4 hour ones?
Oh, it's like 3 hours. Okay, I'll watch it. I was about to
Okay.
say, if this is like a full length like miniseries, I'm gonna pick something else because it's not fair. Okay, I can do that.
So if it's not good, it's gonna be like as if you doubled down and lost.
Yeah, miniseries remake of the classic chiller about a couple who moved to this. It's relocated to Paris, only to and it looks like it has. Is that Tandy Newton?
Oh yeah, I heard that this has a really good lead.
Yeah, that's Tandy Newton. No, my bad. Zoe Saldana. My bad. Yeah, so I'll check this out. We'll see how it goes. I did not expect to land on a miniseries. I knew
You
I
get a big
should
chance of that one.
earlier. All right, so let me know when you're ready. Oh,
So
you.
James doubled down.
Mm-hmm.
You got a 3-hour movie. Let's see where I'm gonna land. Going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oops. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oop. Infected.
How long is it?
What is this? Infected is a brisk hour and 25 minutes. It's a brand new movie from 2021. In a country ravaged by a deadly virus that has triggered a zombie apocalypse. Oh, zombie movie. The military is on the hunt for the man rumored to hold the cure. Directed by Dan Rickard. All right, this could go either way. Zombie movie, yawn, but it could be good. 2021, brand new. So,
Well, only one way to find out. Only one way to find out.
we
So
both had some interesting picks this week on the roulette wheel.
definitely. So we'll get back to you within the next couple of weeks. We don't do the segment every week. We try to break it up between different things that we do here on the podcast. So within the next few weeks, we'll get back to you and we'll report what we thought of our Tubi roulette, and we'll play another round next time. So keeping up with us. As you've listened to this podcast regularly, you know how busy and how active we are in the horror community, on the horror scene. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. Follow us on Instagram at Pickles Horror Show. Those two things are how you're going to find out a lot of what we're up to, because we're working on several film projects right now. Like I said, Mike has already finished directing a film, Pay Up, that we're looking for distribution for at the moment. We have a lot of projects going on, different films, different things, just lots going on. Short films, this podcast, the series that we've been working on, whole lot. Also, follow our TikTok page if you get a chance. It's Horror Show Official. There you will get bite-sized clips of everything that we do. It's sort of like a greatest hits little section of our podcast and our television series. Got good interviews on there, stuff with Sid Haig, the Grady twins from The Shining. Obviously, if you listen, we have David Howard Thornton, Art the Clown, plenty of stuff there that's really interesting. So please go check it out. Keep up with us. Click on our flow page. I leave it in the descriptions of the podcast. That'll lead you to everywhere that this is available. If you want to watch us on YouTube, or if you have Spotify, Apple Podcast, or SoundCloud, you can access it through there. And the flow page is also going to have direct links to our Facebook and our Instagram feeds.
Yes, and I'm directing an upcoming music video, so watch for that. We're going to film it around the end of August. Huh?
Metal music video.
Yep, it's a death metal music video with lots of blood and gore, and I think I came up with a pretty cool concept for it. Let's just see if we can nail it down when we film it. I'm confident.
Yeah.
So we already have our actress. We already have our actress. We have our actor, and we have most of the locations. We have 1 or 2 more locations to do, and we're looking for a makeup artist. But besides that, we're ready to go on a music video. So watch out for our page for that. We'll be posting that on the page.
All right. Till next week, folks. Happy horror.
Happy horror.